Hi,
Good
Landon. Nice to
morning,
meet
Jason.
you.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much. Great movie. Thank you so much for creating it. I mean, it's such a tribute to Korean cinema. And, ever since, the Parasite win, we've just seen more and more Korean cinema. So thank you so much for creating this psychological mix with dark horror, dark humor too, a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit, Jason, about how you decided to blend the two elements of, dark, humor and balancing this psychological horror.
First of all, thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate it. And as to your question, how did I blend dark humor into horror? I think was the question, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I was never really conscious of that too much. I think I did focus on the horror aspects of it because I did realize this was first and foremost a horror film, and I did have to deliver the goods, quote unquote goods. That being said, the dark humor aspect about it, it's funny because it was never my intention to create a funny scene or create a line that was funny or comedic, but I think if there is humor in it, and this might be the case for a lot of Korean films I like, I think it's just the sheer absurdity of the situation the characters are placed in, and the seriousness that the characters have when tackling this absurd situation. You just can't help but laugh when you watch them, flail around trying to survive or make it work, and that may be the humorous aspect of it. And I guess because I wasn't so conscious of trying to juggle the two genres, I was almost free from it, and it worked better for me that way.
Yeah, it's not like it's a comedy, but there's just some organic things in there that, you
Yeah.
just kind of can't help but laugh. But then there's like, it's like a perfectly balanced, and the pacing is so tremendous with this film. And, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your debut feature, correct?
Yes, correct. And thank you so
Yeah.
much
And
for all
so
the
can
things
you
you said.
talk, yeah, can you talk a little bit about how you developed your directorial voice and kind of the genesis that led us to sleep?
Um, I the genesis would be that I worked as an assistant director for a lot of great Korean films, and one of that, the most influential one, was Okja by director Bong Joon-ho. So I think working on that for 2.5 years, I was fortunate enough to be right next to him when he directed every step of production, and I think his sensibility kind of how should I say, it kind of rubbed on me. Although I can't mimic his genius, replicate his genius, some of his style, I think I learned from during that time. That may be where the blend of humor and horror came, the genre elements came. That being said, an, an assistant director, unlike the States, is not a lifelong occupation. It's more of a temporary gig where you're aspiring to be a director. So what we do usually in our downtime or between projects is we write our own screenplays and then hope that it gets made. And that was sort of the genesis of Sleep too. I just had some time and I wrote the screenplay. um, I didn't necessarily want to create a horror film, but I was interested in the subject, and the subject sort of dictated itself into a horror film. And I think my sensibilities of liking, for example, romantic comedies or dark comedies, those sorts of things kind of meshed with the aspect of Sleep to create the film that you watched, Sleep.
Absolutely. And, talk a little bit about, the challenges that you faced, going from writing to directing, and then also some of the directors that kind of influenced you. And you spoke a little bit earlier about some of the directors that influenced you, but influenced your work along the way that we can kind of see that in Sleep.
Um, the challenges of shifting from writing to directing was immense, I think, and it was a trial by fire in some ways. I did learn from the best, I think. Although he didn't teach me directly, I was able to observe how director Bong directed his films, which I realized that I was greatly affected by, and I was trying to consciously and subconsciously mimic when I was directing my own film. The trial was I could just go all day, you know. The When I wrote the screenplay, it was at the height of COVID, and no film was getting financed. I think less than two or three that year, films were being financed, and luckily, Sleep was one of them. I think thank it was due to just the scale of the film, you know. They thought, I think, this they it garnered interest from these great actors, but just the size of it, I think financiers and studios thought it would be easy to tackle, you know, with a small amount of money. And but COVID was at that time during production the biggest challenge, because you still had to quarantine, you know, when you did get COVID for 2 weeks, and our production was 4 months, so 2 weeks. I mean 4 weeks. So 2 weeks meant half of the production. They had to disappear. So there were times we had to work without a first AD. We had to work without a production designer, which was devastating as a debuting director who had to rely on everyone. But that being said, the cast and crew was so great. We were like a tight knit family, and we tried to fill in each other's shoes, whoever was missing, and really try to make it work. And luckily, we were able to complete the film. Another challenge, I don't know. I think my main worry was that being a director, and you know, Korea having this hierarchical sort of culture, I didn't think the veteran cast and crew would respect me as a director, a legitimate director. But you know, just working with them, you realize that that was all nonsense, because them being professionals, of course they respect whoever's in charge or whoever's directing. And they were all great collaborators, all great artists who had tons of ideas, and we had such a great time, and our sole focus was to create the best version of this film that could be, and that sort of united us in this filmmaking process, I think.
No, and it's always great. Film is a very collaborative process, and a good
Yes.
community support, is always what, we can attribute to a good film too. I want to talk a little bit, shifting focus, about the sleep disorders. The film, centers around a sleep disorder. It's wreaked havoc on this relationship. What do you want audiences to take away from, if anything, about mental illness, sleep disorders, relationship advice, anything from the film that you kind of hope that's kind of a subtle messaging in there? Anything?
Oh, and before I answer that question, I think I lost skipped over your last question about my influences and
Oh,
my
yes,
direct. Yeah,
please.
yeah. I'm
Yes, your
sorry.
influences.
I was heavily influenced by which I realized retroactively. I didn't realize while making the film. Well, obviously Bong Joon-ho, but some other influences were Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, and Rosemary's Baby, and also there's a great debut feature film by the director Riley Stearns. He directed the film Faults, which was also a great influence. But just talking about Shining and Rosemary's Baby, it's funny because at the time, the cast and crew, they were begging for references, you know, and influences, so they could get their a better understanding of what I was going for. And me being a terrible debuting director, I didn't really think that was important, you know, handing out references. I just thought we would automatically be on the same page. And so I said there are no references, you know, the story is in the script. It's all in the script. Let's just shoot what's in the script. And after the film was completed, and it went it had a festival run, and just watching it with the audience, I had a lot of questions. A lot of the audience members asked me almost rhetorically whether I was influenced by The Shining and Rosemary's Baby. And when I heard that, the connections were so clear. The basic premise of Sleep. The pregnant wife and the husband and the single location that was, I think, heavily influenced by Rosemary's Baby. And the bathroom scene was greatly influenced by The Shining. It must have been. And also uh, Jack's gradual descent into madness, I think, must have left a great impression on me that it was also a core emotional shift for our protagonist in Sleep as well.
Yeah, that's very cool how you can kind of look back and hear the audience and say, "Hey, that kind of reminded me of this," and then you kind of know, "Hey, that did influence me a little bit." That's really
Yes,
neat. And kind of looking back, it's really cool to look at that in hindsight. That's Thank you so
absolutely.
much for sharing that. Now you
No, not
talk
at
about
all.
Bong being an influence to you. Ever since Parasite won Best Picture, I feel like, audiences globally have been opened up to the world of, subtitles, Korean cinema. And then I feel like Sleep, like I said earlier, adds to that. How do you see the landscape of Korean cinema changing over the years since the Parasite win with the release of Sleep and then going forward?
Um, I think you hit the nail on the head. You said that Bong Joon-ho's Parasite opened the doors for foreign cinema, or at least Korean cinema, to a worldwide audience, and I think that's absolutely correct. Although we had Oldboy, I think Parasite was like the real film that really paved a great highway for Korean films. And the greatest benefactor of that, of the predecessors, I think, are people like myself who created films like Sleep. It's much easier to get eyes on Korean films nowadays. To be absolutely honest, I don't think without the help of Parasite or Oldboy or our predecessors, nobody would have been interested in Sleep outside of Korea. And because of their great films, I think we have a default amount of interest in Korean films, and I'm very grateful about that. And because of that, I have the opportunity to interview people like yourself who have watched the film, which I think it would have been a miracle. It's still a miracle now, but it would have been an even greater miracle, let's say 5 years ago. I wouldn't have imagined that this is something that could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for making the film. Real quickly, what's next for you? What can we expect next? We're so excited for the next project, Jason. We can't
Thank you
wait.
so much. I'm working hard on two projects I'm excited about. I guess I will have to eventually pick a lane, but at the moment, one is a similar horror genre type film, in the same vein as Sleep, but slightly bigger in scale. And another one, I have to preface this by saying, although I made Sleep, one of my favorites, or the favorite genre as a film audience member, is romantic comedies. And my dream is to one day create my own romantic comedy, and hopefully, financiers and investors will share my enthusiasm about this project and get it made. We just have to
Well, they've
wait and
seen the
see.
relationship dynamic that you've portrayed in Sleep, so we just got to take some of that dark humor and make it a little lighter. And I
Right.
think we have a formula on our hands, Jason.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Thank you so much for your contribution to the space and for being a wonderful artist. We can't
Wow,
wait to see
thank
what's
you.
next.
Thank you for your kind words.
Yep. Have a wonderful day.